together a few weeks ago in February, where we started thinking about the exact locations that we want to place air monitoring equipment at within each of the different zones that the committee agreed that we wanted to place some equipment at. So we had some discussions a few weeks ago on some of those initial zones, what schools we wanted to focus on, got some great feedback there. We want to continue that tonight, hopefully finish off the rest of the areas of the network design to get that feedback from you on what school you think is the best to work with in each zone. Our goal with that is hopefully after tonight, we'll have a clear list of the schools that we want to place equipment at, so we can bring that list back to the full committee soon to get the full committee's feedback and approval of that list. And with that approval, we can move forward with getting equipment in place at these schools and start producing and collecting a lot of data for the Stockton area. So that's the first goal of tonight, is to work through that and then get that full list back to the committee for them to consider, the full committee. And I want to thank to Marcus Sherman and Gil Rosas from Stockton Unified. They've been involved in this process. I know they're here tonight listening to this as well, so thanks for being here. And they've been thinking about some of the logistics with us on if we place equipment at some of the Stockton Unified schools, what that would look like. And we really appreciate their involvement and helping us out with that. So big thanks to them. And I'm hoping that we'll have time too after the exercise here to look at the different areas around the Stockton network to see what schools we can place them at. After that, I want to take some time to think about this, the Stockton camp document itself, the language. I know the committee didn't fully approve the entire document. We just looked at the network itself and got an approval of that. So we want to go back to the document itself, think about the language. I think there were maybe still some comments there that we want to work through, some different ideas on what else needs to be in there for the committee to be comfortable with the document itself. So if we have time, we want to go to that as well and get some direct feedback you might have tonight on the document, or we can take some feedback later if you can send in some of your comments on what language changes you might want to see in the camp itself. Then we can make another update to the document and get that back to the full committee for consideration at a date soon. So those are the two things we want to go through tonight. And thanks all for being here. And we're really looking forward to your input. And I'll go ahead and kick it over to Chai Tao, who's going to bring up a map that we sent out to the committee here. Kind of walk us through the different areas that we want to look at and then get some feedback from you on which schools you think would be best to work with to place equipment at. So Chai, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, John, and good evening, everyone. Good to see you all here tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen first. And oops, John, looks like I don't have the ability to screen share yet. I'm not sure who has the host ability here. Who's the host on?
I think Heather might be the host. Yeah. Just changing it.
Oh, okay, all right. We'll be getting that. Okay.
All right, did that help?
Okay, let me try it again. All right, we're in business. Okay, so can everybody see this map? Is it legible? All right, so last time in our last subcommittee.
Excuse me, can you, when we are speaking about the areas, can you zoom in when we get to that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
So last time we had talked about this, we had identified, or you had recommended the primary sites and secondary sites for sections A, sections C, and sections A, B, and C. Actually, that's how far that we got, and so we still have D, the D, E, F, G sections that we haven't talked about. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the document that we had sent to the subcommittee members for you to take a look over it on some of our reasons on what our suggestions are, and then after that we can dig in a little bit deeper into each of these areas on identifying what the site that you would like to prioritize as far as for monitoring. So ABC we've already discussed that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more here. So going to site D, the primary site that we think may be a good location is the one at Roosevelt Elementary right here. So in this section, we have 3 schools. There's Roosevelt, King, and Dr. Lewis D. Stoller's Senior Charter School. But Roosevelt School is right next to Highway 99 here. As we zoom in, you can see that the playground is right against the freeway here. So it's really close to the source of traffic, high traffic there. So we think this is a really primary site, a good primary site. And if not there, I mean, there's Kings Elementary is actually pretty close to Freeway 2. It's just a tad farther than Roosevelt, and very similar Dr. Lewis as well. So that's for site D. Site E, we have San Joaquin, Marshall, and Taylor Elementary in this place here. And we're thinking that in this area here, San Joaquin Elementary may be a primary site that you may want to consider just from the fact that it's downwind from the port. So this may be a good location to place a monitor there. And then site F here, we're thinking that Taft Elementary may be a good location there. It's 0.25 miles away from the freeway, and it's also 0.5 miles away from the railway over here too. So it's in between both of these. But then again, there are some school sites within this area here in section F here that are close to a lot of sources that you may want to also consider too. For example, like Huerta Elementary here. It's really close to I-5 here, and right next to a French Camp Turnpike here as well too. So there's a lot of schools here that are closer to places with higher traffic. And then site G here, we were thinking that Merlot Institute of Environmental Technology really may be a good site within this area here, because it's very close to the rail yard on this location here. So that would be like a primary, and then Montezuma Elementary could be a secondary, as it's closer to the freeway over here, as well as an intersection here that could potentially be a high traffic area. So that's kind of just a really brief overview of some of the reasons why we try to put this together in a way where it's closer to some of the sources of concern that the committee had mentioned to us. And before I conclude this brief overview here, I also wanted to go back to, as you probably saw in your notes when we sent it to you, that in section A, you had recommended that the primary site that we should try to shoot for is one success, and the secondary would be Victory Elementary. And just looking at this map, though, looking at it a little bit closer, so I'm going to actually let's go right onto the street there just to see what that's like. And as you can see here, it's below the freeway, and there's like a sound wall right up here, so we may not be able to really capture the emissions coming from the freeway as well. In addition to that, it's a little bit more difficult to as far as placement of the air monitor, as the roof is on a slope, so we're unlikely able to put it there. So it would have to be somewhere around the playground here. So it's just it's not as good of a site to the air monitor. But if we look at the secondary option that you had mentioned, they agreed on, was Victory Elementary, and we think this one is actually a pretty good site in that the roof is pretty flat, so we could potentially put it there, and it's far enough away that and while still being pretty close to the freeway, that we should be able to capture the emissions coming from the freeway fairly well. So that's one thing that I wanted to bring up, because I know that you had already concluded on that, but just something to reconsider again. And another reconsideration is section C. I think when we were looking at the map, we were looking at the top portion of it, and didn't get a chance to look a little bit farther because section C is this whole area here. And there's one school, Hazelton Elementary. As you see on that one, I mean, the playground is really close to the freeway as well on this one, compared to the site that the committee had originally proposed to be the primary, which is that team charter school here. So that's another consideration for the committee to think about whether you do want it still that team charter, or maybe Hazelton may be a better option at this point. So that concludes my just very brief overview, and I just wanted to open it back up to the subcommittee to hear some of your input, or if you have any questions.
Yeah, Chai, maybe we can go to section A real quick. Let's just zoom into there and see if there's any feedback right now from the subcommittee on thinking about Victory Elementary versus One Success. So it looks like Victory Elementary logistically would probably work better, but wanted to get some feedback here on if the subcommittee here wanted to make that change for the recommendation.
I would like to make that recommendation that Victory.
I think you accidentally muted yourself, Douglas.
Can you discuss how Victory wouldn't be impacted by that same sound that you're stating will be affecting the One Success school?
Yeah, so One Success is so close to this very high wall that if you're getting flow from any type of flow from above the freeway and so high up, there's a high likelihood that it could flow just over it rather than flowing down into the school. So that's one part of it. And another part of it is just, it'll be a lot more difficult to place the monitor. Because usually when we place it in a secure place, which is either on a rooftop or someplace that's well fenced in.
So again, you know, how is the wall not affecting Victory School as well?
Well, with Victory School, you have a longer distance from that, so it gives it more opportunity for the wind to kind of, if it blows it over it, it still has some distance to travel that it could potentially get to that location, rather than just blowing right over it. So if you're having like emissions right here, if the wind blows over it, there's a greater chance of it being blowing it right over the school, rather than going down to the monitor. And the monitor would be down on the ground level, which is farther down from where the freeway is at.
Okay, so there's a lot of traffic that goes in and out in that area, on both sides of Fremont. And so wouldn't that also be catching that? So the Pershing Way, so all of those Pershing Way.
Yeah, potentially. And the other part of it is that, I mean, typically in downwind is going from southeast more toward like this direction. So, but yeah, no, it is a little bit closer to this section of the to the traffic.
Hey, Chai. I'm going to call your attention to Nate's comment in chat, and then I'd like to go back so we can get Douglas's question. Nate pointed out that he's in agreement that the one school is a little close, and it might, you know, the barriers of proximity will affect the pollution coming from I-5, and that he likes Victory over about a mile, which would allow prevailing winds to carry the pollution potentially from I-5 over there. So that was a comment in chat. Douglas, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now. And if you accidentally mute yourself, I will unmute you again. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I was just hearing what recommendation. Can I ask you what was the reason for the recommendation for Victory School? You know, I was more concerned for the children having the monitor right near the space where the children is at for the development, the air quality, the traffic area is I believe it's right by Victory Park. Constantly got, polluted by tree, pollen, whatever it may go to in that area when it's windy all the time. So as well as Persian and as well as Monticello is very high traffic as well, because when you go drive, people driving really fast toward the freeway toward I-5, or either going coming out of the I-5 and going down across Monticello back toward by Victory School anyway. So either way, they're going for traffic. And also Fremont Street is the same thing. So we're almost to the main three almost in the middle of it. So I definitely think that it's an area that is closer to people who have popping out with that. So I'd like to know what was the recommendation for the first one than the alternative. What was the difference? Thank you.
From my understanding, I think when we first looked at this, the main reason for one success over Victory was the fact that it was just visually here, as you see, it's just very close to I-5, and I think that was the original thought with the subcommittee.
Yeah, and just to comment on that too, just thinking about Victory Elementary, and I think Nate, you mentioned this, just the prevailing wind direction, a lot of the times coming from the northwest to the southeast, those emissions from I-5 could be crossing right across Victory Elementary, so it could do a good job capturing some of those freeway emissions there as well. Matt Holmes, looks like your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, are we talking about one of the multi-pollutants or just the standalone PM 2.5? Sorry if I missed that.
Sure. So right here, for section A, the committee had decided that they wanted the PM 2.5 and also VOC speciation sampling.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Can we make it a motion to prove it? I think people already make that a motion to move it.
Well,
Yeah, just looking in the chat here, and based on the comments, looks like there's quite a bit of support to recommend Victory Elementary. So maybe if there's any folks who are uncomfortable with that, they can put something in the chat or speak up now, or otherwise we can just assume that everybody thinks that makes sense to make a change to Victory Elementary.
a really cheesy pun. We have victory for victory.
All right, sounds good. Why don't we go to the next one, which is that section C, where the original thought was that team charter. But now looking at it again, it looks like we missed Hazleton Elementary here, which is actually pretty close to the freeway. And again, this will be a potentially very similar situation that we saw on the other one, but let's take a look at this here. So it's not as high up without a wall or anything like that. So that's another thought on this one. What is everybody's thought on this?
I think if you could go a little slower on the zooming out and zooming in, I think people might be able to see that a little better.
Sure, let me go. Did you want to go back into the street view?
One also should be not too far if you move it down a little ways to capture some rail, move it down drag it down the picture. I believe up at the
Oh.
north, there's some rail lines.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Right there, huh?
And in the chat here, Council Member Fugazi noted that there's also quite a bit of truck traffic that drives through Anderson by the school.
Oh, okay. Yeah, really good point.
So any thoughts from the subcommittee here on concerns with moving the equipment to Hazleton? And just to note, for this monitor, this is one of the multi-pollutant monitors, so it'll measure the number of pollutants in this area.
Since there's some discussion about the issue of idling, and I know that there's an interest regarding some health studies, indoor, outdoor. When you are positioning that monitor,
Did we lose Mary Elizabeth?
Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
like we lost her.
Maybe while we wait for her for a second to hop back on. Chad, can you remind everyone that Matt brought up in the chat? We've talked about it several times, but I agree we'd want to remind everyone the prevailing wind direction is from the northwest. So Chai, if you could sort of like point from with your cursor from the northwest to the southeast.
Yes.
We did a lot of technical analysis kind of in the middle of last year, and we've shown a lot of different maps with that. And I'll drop some in the chat too that have some of the analysis maps I think I shared with the last subcommittee meeting, but that was a great point, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. And that's we have some of those maps in our camp document. And Jonathan had a point here. Are we going to bring this back to the full CSC, the general meeting? And yeah, that is the plan. Jonathan, once we get a list here from the subcommittee of schools that we want to place equipment at, we'll bring it back to the full committee for their update and consideration before we move forward with this.
Any comments from anyone else? Douglas?
So I don't understand what the subcommittee do. Is they just gonna make it a recommendation for the full board to go through with this, or what is the understanding of how, I mean, because you could do it at the regular person staff with a recommendation and put it to for the full board. But would be any different, John?
Yeah, Douglas. So what we wanted to do with the subcommittee here, with of course all of your local knowledge of the Stockton area and the different sources and schools and everything, we wanted to work with this subcommittee to get a specific list of schools that we want to place air monitoring equipment at, which we're going through today and then our meeting a few weeks ago. So then once we have a specific list of schools we want to place equipment at, we'll then take that list back to the full committee, perhaps at our next meeting in April. So the full committee can see what's being recommended for placing air monitoring equipment at, and then with hopefully the support of the full committee on those different schools, and we can move forward with getting the equipment deployed out in this network.
Just tag on to that, John. I think with the real importance of the subcommittee is providing valuable input like we've heard today from some of the members that have familiarity with these locations. They know of the various sources of concern that may, be able to better prioritize which of these locations to consider when you have multiple within the area. So kind of going way back to when we did the initial exercises of identifying sources and locations of concern, and the steering committee members on a map kind of indicated where they think air pollution monitoring would most benefit and be beneficial within these areas. Using that information and then going through these exercises, and we've kind of done a little bit of analysis of the schools and looking at, which ones have spaces, maybe secure areas where we could put this monitoring, those different factors. And like Chai was talking about, slope of roofs, if we needed to put it on a roof, versus a flat roof, all those different factors, and went into the recommendations that we made, but then wanting to hear from the steering committee members about which ones really are going to be the most beneficial and capture the most sources of concern. Thanks.
Chai, there was another comment in the chat here from Cynthia about what were the exact issues with the team charter school.
Yeah, so with team charter school, I mean, there wasn't any major issue. It was just the fact that it looks like Hazleton something was a school that we didn't fully look at as along with the subcommittee when we went through this exercise last time. So putting this document together, we just noticed that, hey, what about Hazleton over here? It's so close to the freeways. So I think it's really just a comparison between Hazleton and team charter here to see which one we think would be a better location to put this air monitor.
So with that, I saw some support in the chat for Hazleton. Are there any more support for that, or any objections to working with Stockton Unified on the Hazleton school?
I think Hazleton would be good. The issue has come up, regarding indoor air quality and outdoor air quality related to the schools, an interest in some characterization of both of those areas. And so when you are placing at Hazleton this monitoring device, will that be taken into account? Because there was some discussion about issues related to drop-off pickup and idling.
Yeah, just to comment on that, and then maybe Jess or Brian can say a bit more. But yeah, certainly the equipment that we placed at the school, this would be a compact multi-pollutant monitor that can measure a number of things. And if we end up doing indoor monitoring as well for like the filtration project, that could just complement this placement as well.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yep. And then to Matt brings up a good point. And again, with all of the different iterations of this similar discussion we've had, I think re-clarifying, and maybe I'll send again the document out that really identifies sort of the sources that we are looking for or looking to monitor within each of these different sections. I'll throw that link in the chat. And then Chai, maybe as we bring up the different sections, you can sort of highlight the high level sources. I think you've been doing it. The freeways are mostly, but I'll kind of link that in the chat for everyone to follow along with as well. And I know there was some documentation sent out ahead of time.
Yeah, Shay, I have a question for you. Looking at that link that Jessica put in, it looks like Area C has a high PM 2.5 emissions. I just wanted to know if that team's charter was in that little square that had the darkest green PM 2.5. If not, then I think it would. I just can't tell from the map. Like I don't know. It's a little looking at it on a screen is a little hard. But I know there's two squares in that PM 2.5 emissions map that has the highest concentrations. So I just wanted to make sure that the team's charter was not in that high emissions area if we're considering moving it, because if it is in that high concentration of PM 2.5, then I think it would make the most sense to put it there.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I'm looking at that too, and I am trying to see if it is. It looks like it's slightly out of it, or if not, maybe just barely in it, Jess.
Yeah, I can't, because if you, I agree, it's hard because these don't have the same grid overlay, but yeah, I agree. It looks like it's probably within it. So Cynthia's point is certainly valid.
Yeah, just eyeballing it myself. It's either gonna be just in or just outside, just to the right of that square. Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah, it looks like it may be almost outside of it. Just barely though.
Yeah, but either way, her point, obviously the pollution doesn't stay within its own grid square. So certainly in that area, that is where, at least according to the inventory, and of course, the emissions are different as we capture them differently. And that, that is kind of what this exercise is, right? We're going to monitor and understand ground truth, maybe the emissions inventory and where we're seeing these peaks, right? And so, that is a consideration if we want to really see, if we are going to monitor it at either Hazleton or Team Charter, we can certainly see, if we are really getting those high PM 2.5 emissions.
Yeah, it also looks like it could potentially capture a lot of NOx emissions too. I mean, the whole C grid is a little on the darker red side, but
yeah, definitely.
But definitely up to, and kind of looking at it too, looks like diesel particulate emissions are in that same grid as well. So I think maybe that's why Team's Charter was additionally picked up, just because looking at your emissions inventory, it looks like that specific grid has heavy concentrations of a lot of it.
All right, so we have some support here for Hazleton. We have some thoughts here from Cynthia on still trying to work with Team Charter. Any other support for Hazleton, or anybody have similar thoughts to Cynthia for this section? All right, so it sounds like overall, just in the chat and what others have said, looks like there's more support for Hazleton at this moment. So based on some of that feedback, I think the subcommittee here is thinking Hazleton could be a better spot for this monitor.
All right, sounds good. So let's move on to the next one, which is D. This section here. And so one of the primary ones that based on our preliminary review, it looks like Roosevelt may be a good potential site since it's pretty close by to the freeway over here. Again, we can take a little bit closer view down here just to see what it looks like. And again, it might be too close as well too, but. So on this one, we have the freeway down here instead of, it's gonna be higher than the freeway itself, but it is still fairly close to the freeway. Let's see if we can view from down there. Yes, we can, yeah. Yeah, so it's right above there where the school is at. There's still some distance to the playground and to the rest of the school as well over here. So that's one there, and then a secondary one could be at King Elementary here. We can take a closer view. That looks like. Actually, we won't be able to see the freeway from here. Oops. What about that slip? Let me see. Yeah, it looks like it's pretty close to the elevation, but it has a sound wall there.
Thanks, Chai. So yeah, just based on those thoughts, our assessment of it, we thought that Roosevelt Elementary was the best spot. And this would be a PM 2.5 monitor only at this, in this zone, in this section. So any feedback on, you think Roosevelt could be the best or King Elementary? Looks like Jonathan.
And what about the Stallworth?
Yeah, so there's the other one here too, Stallworth Senior Charter School. It's more of upwind up the freeway. And it looks like it doesn't have, and maybe it does, as far as, I guess if there's a little bit, yeah, there's a playground right here.
Marcus made a point in the chat that the Roosevelt School is impacted by both highways 4 and 99.
So we got Highway 99 there, and what is it? This other one here?
Looks like Matt and Jonathan both feel like Roosevelt's a better spot for this in the chat. Same as Sylvia. So it sounds like overall people are good with Roosevelt for this area.
All right.
Okay, cool.
Let's go to section E. So section E is here. We have 3 schools: San Joaquin, Marshall, and Taylor Elementary. So what we were thinking about would be San Joaquin Elementary, right downwind from the port there. So this is San Joaquin, and then Marshall Elementary here, and they're all pretty close to each other. And Taylor just right next door. And again, this one is just more of a proximity that it's a bit closer. We have potential emissions coming downwind from the port here and everything else here.
I'm not sure. I thought one of those schools was going to close. I'm not sure which. Could somebody from Stockton Unified speak to that, please?
None of them that I know of. This is Sylvia. None.
All right, so any feedback on San Joaquin Elementary? If that's a good spot for this area? Do we have support for that, or would you rather consider a different location? Matt's got a question. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I mean, San Joaquin seems like it's underneath the port and might be better at capturing more than just PM with the NOx and SOx coming out of there. I also know that it's interesting to straddle a freeway when you're looking at PM. And so with the sensor at Hazleton, having one at Taylor could also be scientifically interesting. But then again, we're going to need to sort of stitch all of these together with more sensors. So I don't know. For my druthers, I'd rather catch the nastier stuff coming out of the bigger stacks at the port. But then again, I'm not referring to the emission source monitoring that I'm sure we're going to get to. So depending on the complexity of the tool is the choice that I would make here. If it's just PM, might as well put it at Taylor.
Yeah, so for E, it's just PM. And so we at Washington Elementary is where we have the trailer where we'll have multiple pollutants over there.
Well, but does that consider I mean, Wash is kind of also east of a couple of these peculiar sources that are just going to be blowing straight down on San Joaquin Elementary. I guess this is just gets back to my general frustration with really discrete monitoring sites. But I guess we can't monitor everywhere.
And again, we do have, if there are any certain sites that are of concern, we still have the vans that we can take to those locations we have that flexibility as well.
Do we have a sensor going in like near DTE, considering its preponderance of emissions with NOx and SOx?
Oh, DTE.
Yeah, just from your source apportionment document, they're like 95% of all of those emissions in the whole study area. And usually, in my experience, monitoring, we don't need to get off the schools topic, but monitoring programs usually look at the sources first and then the sensitive receptors. I know we're at the sensitive receptor end of this, but are we monitoring at source for that one? It's a peculiar standout in your own Appendix C. And then we wouldn't have to worry about that down here in Section E. Sorry for shifting.
No, I got you, Matt. Yeah, definitely. Like this exercise here, we're focused on different school locations, but yeah, that's something we could keep thinking about at the port facilities themselves. I know a lot of them have continuous emission monitoring to understand what's coming out of the stacks, but if there could be additional monitoring in those areas as well, that's something we can think about as we continue to do monitoring in the Stockton area.
Yeah, and by contrast, if we've got that, then let's get good PM at Taylor and point our fingers at I-5 is what I was thinking.
Looks like in the chat, it's kind of split between San Joaquin and Taylor. Got another recommendation from Jonathan on Taylor. Cynthia likes Taylor. Seems like more support now for Taylor Elementary for this monitor. So I think we'll just go with that. Looks like there's more support for Taylor than San Joaquin. Yep, Jennifer agrees with Taylor. Okay.
Well, sounds good. All right, so let's move to F over here. And so a thought here was Taft Elementary. It's it's really close to fairly close to I-5 here, and also fairly close to the rails over here. So our initial thought was Taft here, and in addition to that, it kind of helps cover the southern portion of this whole community as well. So Taft Elementary there, and then of course up here, we have Huerta, Edison, and St. George Parish as well. And those are, like this one is pretty close to the intersection here and the freeway as well. Edison over here.
And rail, there's.
And Chai, can you clarify, this is also just a PM only, right?
Correct. Yeah, right here is just PM. And rail's right over here.
So Jonathan has a comment about PM monitors if they measure both PM 2.5 and PM 10. And to answer that, you can measure one or the other, but most monitors you can't do both at the same time. It would take two separate monitors to do both PM 10 and PM 2.5 simultaneously. So what we're talking about here is just PM 2.5. Yeah, Matt said it too. We would need side-by-side units to do both together.
All right, any thoughts?
Any feedback, any thoughts on these options here?
We're looking at Taft at the bottom of the map versus some of the more northerly school sites.
Right.
I would advocate for pinning down the bottom of the map as much as possible.
That's what we felt too, to getting kind of that downwind location, what's happening at the bottom of the map. We thought that'd be valuable. Very supportive of Taft. So is Sylvia. Jonathan supportive, as close to the airport as possible. Nate's good with Taft. Okay.
All right, cool.
Cool, thank you.
All right, so this is the last section here, which is section G that covers this area here. And so our preliminary thought on this was Merlot Institute of Environmental Technology. And that is primarily because it's close to the rail yard here. And again, this section here, the initial thought on it was to use a multi-pollutant compact air monitor, so we would be able to monitor multiple types of pollutants in this area here. And this one is a bit closer. Another potential is Van Buren Elementary, which is right here. And that is still fairly close, and it is downwind. So both of these are somewhat downwind from it. So this one just due to being a little bit closer. And as you can see here, the playground is from over here. And I think, I'm not sure if this is a playground or a park, but there is an area here. It looks like it's one of the playground that's near.
Park. It's
Was
a
it a
park.
park? Okay. Any thoughts?
What are the colors for the squares? Can someone refer back to them? What does it
Yeah,
say?
could you also elaborate as to why a multi-pollutant monitor here and not at Taft?
Yeah, I think of this when we shared it with the committee and we talked about this. I think one of the main concern was from the rail yard here of all the various types of potential pollutants that could be coming from there. There seemed to have been a lot of concern with that. And so that's why this section G, we had selected the multi-pollutant monitor there. And I think on the on Taft here was more of a looking downwind from traffic here. So we're thinking, okay, primarily the issue would be the PM2.5 from the traffic from the freeway.
Also, just looking at the camp document, we had a few maps in there showing different health indicators. That section G around there has higher indicators for asthma, cardiovascular disease, and lower birth weight in general. So that could have, played into the thoughts from the full committee thinking about that. That would be a good spot for a multi-pollutant monitor with all of those health concerns in that area. Any issues with Merlot? It looks like Sylvia is supportive of Merlot.
You thinking just about going dead center, John, since there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of get you closer to the rail as well? I mean,
yeah.
Without knowing how the local wind acts, I mean, I know we got general wind, but it makes sense to kind of be there in the middle.
Yep, definitely. And Marcus made a good point that Merlot is Stockton Unified's environmental science high school. So it could fit really well with their educational program there. I think it'd be a really cool overlap. Matt liked that. It's good. Yeah, makes sense. It's awesome. Yeah, getting more students involved and plugged in, it's a great thing. Okay, looks like we've got good support for working with Merlot.
And that pretty much concludes it. So thank you for all your help and efforts in helping us identify these. I think our next step right now is we'll go ahead and put all of this together again into a similar document, and then we can share this with the rest of the committee for final decisions on it.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, thanks everybody. So we'll get this organized, get it back to the full committee. We'll get it on an agenda soon and have the full committee take a look at it and get any final feedback. And hopefully if the full committee is good with this, we can go forward and start getting this equipment deployed and working with these school locations. So this has been super helpful, everybody. I really appreciate it.
And just want to touch on one thing. Chai talked about it a little bit, but the van has been a really important tool that we've been able to get a lot of speciated data that Matt and others have talked about tonight. And that's where in Fresno and Shasta, we've really gotten a lot of feedback from steering committee members about where they would like to see data from. We've collected it, compiled it, shared it, and got input, and it's been really beneficial in its use. And we hope to do the same thing, working with the steering committee, the subcommittee, on identifying areas where that would be a benefit, and time frames, how long we want to keep it there, those types of things. So on top of this, and then as we start collecting information from the various sites, that will then help inform the steering committee and the district on what next steps can be following the community air monitoring plan. So like everybody said, this is very important to get the feedback from the steering committee, understanding that you're the experts in your community, where this would be most beneficial. And thank everybody for their time tonight. I see Mary Elizabeth had a question. When will this monitoring be initiated? We'd love to, at the next steering committee, to take the subcommittee's recommendations back to the regular committee, getting any additional input that they may have. But if we get approval from them, we would start working with the various schools right away. And I know Gil's been a great, and Marcus have been great partners, and very hopeful to start deploying this equipment as soon as we can. But in the interim, if there's specific sites that the steering committee have thoughts about, in addition to, like, for example, Washington Elementary, understanding where this equipment may be deployed, if there's sites where you think, well, maybe we should start looking at using the mobile van, that'd be great feedback as well.
Thanks, Ryan, for that overview. So we've got a few minutes left here. There's one other item we wanted to cover on the agenda. I know we only got a few minutes left, but the camp document itself. So going back a few months, the full committee approved just the design of the network, which is what we've been moving forward with. That's what we're talking about here now. It's a little more detailed here, thinking about the exact schools we want to work with. So this is great feedback here, but the language in the camp document itself, the rest of it, the committee did not approve the entire document. So we wanted to get some thoughts from you on next steps for that. So we got some good feedback, some good language suggestions on the camp document. We made an update to it. That latest document was linked in the last email we sent you for the subcommittee meeting. Next steps for the document itself, we need to have the full committee, look at it again. And we wanted to know, are there any other language suggestions that you might have for the camp document itself? Any thoughts you have to clarify anything with what that document is, given a high level overview of what the work that we're going to be doing in Stockton. You may have some thoughts now about what that could look like, what could be included. Feel free to give us some thoughts later on, but we do want to take that back to the full committee here soon with an updated document if there's any language changes that you want to see, so we can have the full document approved by the committee and we can move forward with that. So we've got a few minutes here, so if there's any thoughts right now, we can get some of your thoughts, and then we can perhaps get some thoughts from the rest of the committee later on. So any thoughts now on the language in the document? Douglas.
Thank you. Yes, can you? I'm a little misunderstanding what you're saying. What do you mean by the language of the document? Are we supposed to go over that now? What is the language that you're referring to when it comes to Stockton Camp?
Yeah, so the Stockton Camp was a document, and maybe it's been a while since you've seen it. It probably has been. But that document explained more background about monitoring in the area, what the goals were, the type of equipment that would be used, how the data would be made available, how we would learn from that. So that's the document that had a lot of like writing and language in there describing everything that we're going to be doing. So the full committee here has already gone through and made some suggested updates. We made some changes to the document that's on the Stockton Air Monitoring webpage. And maybe Jess, you could drop a link in here in a minute on where somebody can find that. So we discussed that at the November CSC meeting a few months ago, and we got a lot of good feedback from the committee, and the committee was comfortable with just moving forward with just the network design, the map itself at the time, which is what we've been working on with this subcommittee here and with Stockton Unified, thinking about these different locations. But the committee decided to leave the rest of the document aside and keep thinking about that and how it describes this whole monitoring process in Stockton. So that's something we still need to work through, is to go back to see if there are any good feedback, any direct feedback from the committee on the language itself that describes the monitoring work we'll do in Stockton. So that's kind of where we left it. We haven't finished that process yet. So that's what I want to open up here with this group, to see if there's any direct suggestions right now on what language changes could happen, or we could continue working on that together after this meeting.
So it's already been drawn up, but that you have the sample draft of of the language yet? Thank you.
Yes, we do, and it's just dropped the link here in the chat, and there should have been a link to that in the email we sent to the Stockton committee about this meeting. There should be a link there where you can open up the document and read through it and see if you have any thoughts on suggested language changes. Jonathan, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to I guess it was my part where I asked about utilizing the RAN app. I know you guys answered that question, but when I looked at the updates and tried to search the term RAN in the updated camp, I can't seem to find it. Is that something we're still looking to streamline into, or is that still needing to be tinkered with?
Yeah, I do remember that comment coming up. If it's not in there, we should have added it. I do remember that.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's not there, we'll make that change. I do remember that suggestion coming up.
Please, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. See, Ned has a comment. Latest version was November 2020. Are we going to have an updated version? So that's the goal, Ned, is that since we've had that updated version in 2020, that was the latest one. And the committee set it aside, wanted to keep thinking about it and what language could be in there. So if the group here has any comments on the camp, you can send that to us when you get a chance to look through that. If you haven't had a chance to look through that November 2020 version, please take a look. What other ideas might you have to improve the language in there? And we can plan to bring that back to the full committee for their review and thoughts on it. So, oh yeah, thanks, Ryan. Also in the November 2020 version, it shows an underline the updates that we made to the document, so you can see what was added based on some of the feedback we got from the committee from the initial version. So that's on the website to take a look at. So since it's 6 o'clock, I don't want to respect your time, and we shouldn't go too much longer, but definitely take a look at the document. If you haven't taken a look at the updated document, go through it, take a look, collect your thoughts on any language updates you think need to be in there. And we could think about maybe giving the subcommittee here or even the full committee a look, like a timeline to take a look, get us some of their updated comments on what they think need to be in there, so that we can bring an updated version back to the full committee to take a look at, and hopefully get a full approval and support from the committee with that document. Matt recommends maybe we talk about it again at another meeting, so that's an option too. I don't want to shortchange this discussion here. We can maybe plan another meeting to take some more time to dig into it and talk about it. So we could plan on that.
Douglas has his hand up, but I don't know if that was his question from before.
No, I have, no, I have it. I have no question. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, John, just to explain, I think it's been a while, and to ask folks to, jump in and write comments in the abstract on their own isn't going to get you the feedback that you want. Might do us well to sort of sit down together, revisit where we were, comments like Ned's, because there were language things, and then there were some substantive things, and be good just for everybody to be involved. I know more meetings, what a stupid request, but it might save us trouble in the long run.
Okay. Yeah, I know we've been really heavy on the SERP over the past few months, focusing time on that. So I know it's been a long time since people have probably thought about the language in this document. So we should give it the time that it needs. All right, seeing no other hands up or comments here, I think we'll go ahead and close out this subcommittee meeting for tonight. So just really appreciate you being here, for your attention and your direct feedback. It's been super helpful to help us think about how we want to design this network and collect a lot of really great data for the Stockton community. So really excited. So thanks everybody, and we will talk again soon. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Heather. Bye, Anthony. I'm off.